31 years ago this week, on August 27th, 1990, Summerslam was at the Philadelphia Spectrum. Vince McMahon and Roddy Piper did the commentary after Jesse Ventura quit the company weeks before the show. After a dispute with Vince over a video game that Sega wanted to do, involving his likeness, Vince said, "I own your likeness," and he wouldn't let him do it, so he quit. Texas Tornado Kerry Von Erich, not long after he had just made his debut, he subbed for the injured Brutus the Barber Beefcake, and he won the Intercontinental title from Mr. Perfect. That was the parasailing accident that shattered Beefcake's face and almost killed him. That's why he couldn't wrestle on the show. The blow-off was supposed to take place on this show between Tito Santana and Rick Rude. Or not Rick Rude, Rick Martel. I got my Ricks confused. Ric Flair, Rick Rude, Rick Martel. No, it was Rick Martel. They split at WrestleMania the year before, like a year and a half before this. At WrestleMania 5, Martel walked out on Tito. That was the end of Strikeforce. He became the model. Well, they never had a big singles match on TV. They never had a pay-per-view singles match to really blow off their feud. So this was going to be it. This was going to be the blow-off. But Martel got injured 2 months before the show. He didn't make it back in time, so they never did get that singles match. And instead, Santana lost to the Warlord in a quick squash. Bad News Brown wrestled his final match for the WWF in a loss to Jake the Snake Roberts. The Hart Foundation regained the Tag Team Championship from Demolition in a best-of-3 falls match, 2 falls to 1. Demolition being Smash and Crush. Axe had, months earlier, had an allergic reaction to shrimp. He had gone out to eat with his wife. They had Chinese food. And he had some shrimp, and he kind of felt a little burning sensation in his throat. He sent the food back and got something else to eat. They went to the movies that night. As he's sitting down watching this movie, all of a sudden his throat is on fire. And he stands up. He's going to go walk outside and get some fresh air. And he says the last thing he remembers is putting his hand on the door to push the glass door open. And I guess at that point he just collapsed. And he ended up in the hospital. They ran tests. And they said, yeah, you had an anaphylactic reaction, and you almost died. And I guess what happened is, by going back and forth to Japan and eating the food over there for so long, he had developed a toxic buildup of iodine and had an anaphylactic reaction. So, and actually since then, as he talked about in one of the interviews I saw him do, he also realized he's allergic to bee stings. He said he was stung by a bee 2 or 3 times and had a reaction. So he doesn't go anywhere without his EpiPen. But because of what happened, they transitioned him into more of a managerial role and they added Crush to the act. Some people think it was a heart issue. He had heart problems. He had a heart attack. It had nothing to do with his heart. It was all just the allergic reaction that he had. So Smash and Crush were not nearly as good as Axe and Smash. I was not a fan of, swapping them out. I was not a fan of the way they treated Demolition there at the end of their run. I think it was bullshit. The way that Vince McMahon finally got LOD to come in, and it's almost like, well, now we have LOD, so fuck Demolition. I always thought that was bullshit. Demolition got over, in spite of whatever comparisons people made to them being rip-offs of LOD or whatever, they got over on their own big time. And if you were a young WWE fan, as I was back then, Demolition was a big deal. Demolition was the shit. And they deserved a better send-off than what they got. Sensational Sherry, the Queen, Queen Sherry, got a forfeit win over Sweet Sapphire. Sapphire was, of course, the woman that was brought in to dance with Dusty Rhodes. Sapphire didn't show up. She was, there for the mixed tag match at WrestleMania. It was Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire against the Macho King and Sensational Sherry, but here they were supposed to have a singles match. No Sapphire. So she gets counted out, and Sherry is awarded the win, and later on it was going to be Randy Savage one-on-one with Dusty Rhodes, and before the match, out comes Ted DiBiase, and he announces that he had purchased Sapphire. He bought Sapphire. I think she came out like in a fur coat or a mink coat or something like that. He was showering her with gifts. He bought her off. That's why she didn't show up. And then Savage ended up beating Dusty in a quick 2-minute match. I don't know if Dusty was hurt or... you talk about burying a fucking guy. He beat him in 2 minutes flat. This was also the return of Hulk Hogan, who had been gone for months after a storyline injury at the hands of Earthquake, or the butt, I should say, of Earthquake. He came back for a match against Earthquake and got the win over him by countout. And then in the main event, it was the Ultimate Warrior retaining his WWF title over ravishing Rick Rude. Yet another SummerSlam match between these two inside of a cage. This was the first time, the first WWF title match on pay-per-view without any involvement whatsoever from Hulk Hogan. Either in the ring, as a referee, in someone's corner. Even WrestleMania 4, in the finals of the tournament, Hogan was in Savage's corner for the match against DiBiase. So this was the first one, no Hogan, as part of the main event at all. 30 years ago this week, on August 26, 1991, SummerSlam was back at Madison Square Garden where it all began. This is my personal favorite SummerSlam of all time. I played that VHS tape so much, my VCR ate the tape. It was a traumatic experience for me. This was before the WWE Network. I had the original tape recorded that day in 91, and I had it in the machine. As soon as I heard the crunch of the tape, my heart sank. I tried unsuccessfully to pull the tape out very slowly, but it was too late. So I remember scouring the internet for tape traders. I wanted to buy a new copy of the tape. I wanted to buy an original copy of the show. And I found one on this website, this guy John McAdam. He had all these wrestling tapes, and I bought it off of him. I bought SummerSlam 91. I bought a couple of old Saturday Night's Main Event shows from him. This show was dubbed The Match Made in Heaven, The Match Made in Hell. Heaven being the wedding of the Macho Man Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. And Hell being the main event of the Ultimate Warrior. Well, of course, Hell, the Ultimate Warrior. It's in the main event. The Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan teaming up to take on the Triangle of Terror. Sergeant Slaughter, Colonel Mustafa, who of course is the former Iron Sheik, who for whatever reason they gave him a totally different gimmick when he came back, as if nobody would fucking know who he is, and General Adnan, with Sid Justice as the special referee. Sid had just signed to come over, and they made him the referee for the match. Hogan and the Sheik, look at this, back in the ring, in the garden. Although Bobby Heenan mixed them up, and he thought the wedding was the match made in hell. I can't blame the guy. There was concern coming into the show that Mr. Perfect may not be able to defend his Intercontinental title against Bret the Hitman Hart. He missed most of the summer with a broken tailbone, bulging discs in his back. Not only did he wrestle that night, he put Bret over in the biggest way he possibly could. Bret says that Hennig told him he wanted him to kick out of the Perfect Plex, which up to that point, only the biggest names like Hogan and Warrior had kicked out of the Perfect Plex. He submitted in Bret's sharpshooter, even if Earl Hebner called for the bell a little too early. These two had one of the greatest matches in SummerSlam history. I like their King of the Ring match in '93 better, but this match is an absolute classic. And Hennig did not wrestle another match for quite some time. It was about 15 months when he came back at Survivor Series in 92, and then he got back in the ring. The Natural Disasters beat the Bushwhackers in a match that featured Andre the Giant's final U.S. appearance for the WWF in the corner of the Bushwhackers. Andre was just in very rough shape by this point. Virgil pinned Ted DiBiase to win the $1 Million Championship. The Legion of Doom beat the Nasty Boys to become the first and only team ever to hold the WWF, AWA, and NWA tag team titles. The Big Boss Man beat the Mountie in a jailhouse match, which saw the Mountie cuffed and loaded into the paddy wagon to spend the night in a New York City jail. This was comedy done right. I love the skits with the Mountie being fingerprinted. You want the finger? Here's the finger. Having his picture taken, then he was locked away in his cell with some dude in a leather outfit. He's screaming, "Get me out of here." This was great. And in the match made in hell, Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior did beat Slaughter, Mustafa, and Adnan. The month before this, the Warrior had sent Vince McMahon a note, making certain demands. He wanted to be paid the same as Hulk Hogan. Vince McMahon agreed to all of his demands. But he only did that to get him to the ring for the match. He knew when the match was over, he was going to get rid of him. And so after the match, McMahon, he didn't actually fire him. He suspended him, and he sent Warrior a very nasty letter. He was trying to hurt this man's feelings. They went over this in his Dark Side of the Ring episode, and I mean, boy, he put some biting comments in that letter. One of which was that Warrior was a legend in his own mind, and it was in no way the kind of star that Hogan was. And then in the grand finale, Randy Savage and Elizabeth, who were already married in real life, staged a wedding live in the ring, the match made in heaven. After the show, at the wedding reception, the party, Elizabeth opened a gift box and a snake jumped out. King Cobra slithered out of the box. Didn't jump. Jake Roberts and The Undertaker attacked Savage. Sid made the save, which led to the snakebite incident and one of my favorite feuds with the Macho Man and Jake the Snake Roberts. 29 years ago this week, on August 29th, 1992, Summerslam was taped at Wembley Stadium in London, England, in front of a legitimate 80,000 fans. It did not air for another 2 days on pay-per-view. Originally, it was going to be held in Washington, D.C., and Bret Hart was going to defend his Intercontinental title, probably in a ladder match, against Shawn Michaels. But once they decided on Wembley, because business in the States for them at that point, very, very soft. But they were doing booming business overseas, all over Europe and in England. So Vince McMahon decided to do the show at Wembley, and at that point it made sense to have the British Bulldog as the local, the countryman, challenge for the championship in the main event. LOD defeated Money Incorporated. As Road Warrior Animal remembered it, Hawk was openly popping pills and sedatives in the backstage area. When he went out there, he was almost sleepwalking. Somehow, he managed to ride a motorcycle down to the ring. I mean, you hear these stories now and look back at it, they put this guy in a fucking motorcycle. You know how badly that could have ended up? The condition that he was in? You go back and watch him in the ring, it looks like he's sleepwalking through the entire match. He's so sluggish and lethargic. He's all pilled up. So they have the match, they win the match over Money Inc., but then Hawk skips out on the flight back to the U.S. Supposedly he spent time in London hanging out with the London chapter of the Hells Angels, which is a biker gang. And at the next set of TV tapings, Animal gets informed that Hawk had quit the promotion. Didn't tell him. Hawk went and quit. And that caused a lot of heat and a big rift between Hawk and Animal. They didn't talk to each other for a long time, and they didn't even wrestle together as LOD until 1996. This was 92. Animal ended up hurting his back. He went out. He was being paid on a Lloyd's of London policy, so he didn't wrestle for a long time. But LOD did not reunite in the ring until 1996. Nailz defeated Virgil, and months later he would become so enraged over his, in his mind, low payoff for the show that he famously choked Vince McMahon in his office backstage and was fired, claiming that Vince made a pass at him sexually. Shawn Michaels and the model Rick Martel had a heel against heel battle, fighting for with Sensational Sherry in the middle between these two men. This was the match where Sherry had them both agree not to hit the other in the face. We had a face versus face match for the WWF Championship, the Ultimate Warrior challenging the Macho Man Randy Savage. And Warrior won by countout. Ric Flair, Mr. Perfect, they were at ringside. They caused the countout finish. They were going after Savage's knee. The storyline leading into this match was Flair and Perfect were trying to drive a wedge between Savage and Warrior and cause one to think that the other was in cahoots with Flair and Perfect. In reality, neither one was. And it is mind-boggling to me that Ric Flair did not have a match at SummerSlam on this massive card in front of 80,000 people. Flair basically did a run-in in this match. He did not have a match of his own on this show. And in the main event, Bret Hart lost the Intercontinental title to the British Bulldog. He had to carry the Bulldog through their championship match because Bulldog, in the ring, very early on, told Bret, I'm fooked. I'm fooked. He forgot everything he was supposed to do. And the reason he forgot everything he was supposed to do, Bret says that Davey had been smoking crack with Jim Neidhart for weeks back in the States before flying over to England for the show. He was high as a kite. Bret didn't see him for 2 months. As he was coming up with ideas to prepare for this match, he didn't actually see the Bulldog for 2 months. He would call his sister Diana, hey, where's Davey? He was never available. She didn't know where he was. Oh, he's hanging out with the Anvil. Little did he know they were off smoking crack together. And so now Bret has to put this match together and hope that Bulldog can hold up his end of the deal. He even says at one point, if you watch, there's a point in the match where he kicks Bulldog. Bulldog is down, and he kicks him so hard in the head. He was kicking him in the head to wake his fucking ass up. The fact that these two were still able to have the match that they did, a classic, people still talk about it to this day, is a testament to Bret Hart as a performer. And if that isn't reason enough to show you why Bret is the best, then I don't know what is.